It was a Tuesday, not just any Tuesday, but the Tuesday my whole world ended and then somehow began again. You know that feeling when a punch lands right in your gut and all the air leaves your body, leaving you gasping for something you can't find. Yeah, that was me. I walked into the conference room at Sterling Solutions like I had a million times before. Our family business. My life, my blood, sweat, and tears poured into every single brick, every line of code, every handshake. Sterling Solutions wasn't just a company. It was Grandpa Joe's dream, then Dad's. And for the last 10 years, it had been mine. I started at the bottom, sweeping floors, answering phones, learning every single screw and bolt of this place. I was 35, and every single part of my identity was wrapped up in Sterling. Across the big oak table sat my uncle, Marcus. He was Dad's younger brother, always the slick one, always talking about big deals and new ventures, but rarely actually doing anything concrete. Next to him was my cousin, Brenda. She was Marcus's daughter, sharp-tongued and ambitious, but without the patience to truly understand the nuts and bolts of what we did. Then there was Aunt Carol, my mom's sister, who somehow ended up with a small share of the business after Grandma passed. She was usually quiet, just nodded along, but today her face was set, like she was about to deliver bad news. My own brother David sat furthest from me. He looked pale, avoiding my eyes. That was the first red flag, though I didn't see it for what it was then. I just thought he was tired. "All right, let's get this meeting started," Marcus said, straightening his expensive tie. He was never one for small talk. "We have an important matter to discuss today regarding the future direction of Sterling Solutions." I leaned back a little confused. We had our monthly board meeting next week. What was so important it couldn't wait? "Is there an emergency, Marcus? Everything seemed stable last quarter." Brenda cleared her throat. "It's not an emergency, cousin. It's a strategic realignment. We've been discussing this for a while. Certain changes are necessary for growth." I frowned. "What changes?" "You know I am always open to new ideas, but we usually hash these things out during our planning sessions." My gaze flicked to David. He still wouldn't look at me. My stomach started to clench. Something was very wrong. Marcus leaned forward, his voice losing its usual smooth edge, hardening into something cold. "We've had an informal vote among the majority shareholders, and we've come to a decision. We believe that Sterling Solutions needs new leadership. Someone with a fresh perspective, a more modern approach." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about, Marcus? I am the CEO. I've been running this company for 10 years. We've had our most profitable years under my leadership." I could feel a tremor in my voice, a tremor of fear, but I tried to push it down. This had to be a joke, a sick, twisted joke. Aunt Carol finally spoke, her voice surprisingly firm. "It's not personal, darling, it's business. We just feel you've become too set in your ways. The company needs to evolve." "Evolve?" I sputtered. "I practically built the new digital division from scratch. I brought in all our biggest clients in the last 5 years. What set in my ways are you talking about?" My eyes darted to David again. His face was a mask of misery. "David, what is this? What's going on?" He finally looked up, his eyes glassy. "I am sorry, brother. I couldn't stand against them. They made a good case. For the future, I felt like I'd been slapped. My own brother. The one I taught to ride a bike. The one I defended in schoolyard fights. The one I'd helped get his first job here at Sterling. He was in on it." Marcus picked up a thick folder from the table. "Effective immediately. We are exercising our right as the majority shareholders to remove you from your position as CEO. and from the board of directors. A new board will be appointed, and Brenda will be taking over as interim CEO. The words hit me like a physical blow. Remove me from my own company, my vision, my passion, my everything. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a loud scrape. You can't do this. This is my company. My grandfather founded this. My father left it to me. My voice was rising, raw with disbelief and fury. Brenda smirked, a cruel, triumphant glint in her eyes. Actually, cousin, we can. We have the numbers. Marcus, Aunt Carol, David and I represent 65% of the shares. You only hold 30%. You are out. 30%, the number echoed in my head. That was true, on paper. After Dad had done some restructuring before he passed away. He'd wanted to ensure all the family had a stake, but he'd always implied my portion was the largest, the one with controlling power. He'd always said I was the one who would lead. My head spun. They had planned this. They had gathered their votes. They had betrayed me, my brother, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, my family. The people I loved, the people I trusted, had just ripped the rug out from under my entire existence. I felt a dizzying mix of white-hot rage and soul-crushing despair. My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to smash something. But I just stood there staring at their smug faces, at David's shame-filled gaze. You are making a mistake, I choked out, the words barely a whisper. A huge mistake. Marcus chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. We don't think so. Security will escort you out. Your company car has been repossessed. Your access badges are deactivated. We'll mail you your personal effects. It was so cold, so clinical. Like I was a stranger, an interloper, not the person who had dedicated their life to this place. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. The pain was physical, a sharp, twisting agony in my chest. As I stood there frozen, the security guards entered the room. Two burly men, their faces impassive. They knew me. I knew them. They had worked here for years. Now they were being used to kick me out. The humiliation was crushing. But then, as I stared at Brenda's triumphant smirk, at Marcus's arrogant posture, a tiny flicker, a single spark ignited in the darkness of my despair. 30%. My father's words, long forgotten, started to bubble up from the depths of my memory. He'd always been so careful about the structure, about control. He'd said something years ago about ensuring the true leadership could never be questioned. Something about a specific kind of share, a different class, a type of share that gave more power. My grandfather had done something similar, I remembered him saying. It was a fail-safe, a legacy protection. The thought, faint at first, grew stronger. Tiny defiant voice in my head amidst the roaring heartbreak. They thought they had the majority. They thought they had the majority. They thought they had 65%. But what if they were wrong? What if they had overlooked something? What if they had forgotten something absolutely crucial about how Sterling Solutions was actually structured? I looked at their faces again, their smug certainty. They truly believed they had won. They truly believed they had stripped me of everything. And in that moment, a new feeling rose up, pushing past the pain. It was a cold, hard resolve. They had voted me out. They had betrayed me. But they had forgotten one very important thing. My grandfather, a shrewd old fox, always had a trick up his sleeve, and it was time to find out if he'd left one for me. The walk out of Sterling Solutions was the longest walk of my life. Each step felt heavy, like my shoes were filled with lead. The faces of the employees I passed blurred. Some looked away uncomfortable. Others offered sad, sympathetic glances. I couldn't meet their eyes. The shame was a burning brand on my forehead. My family had just publicly executed me. I didn't fight the security guards. There was no point. The battle wasn't in that conference room, not anymore. As I reached the parking lot, I saw my car wasn't there. They had really thought of everything. My company-issued sedan, gone. Just like that. I had to call a taxi. The irony of calling a taxi from the place I'd always driven to, always parked at the CEO's spot, stung. The ride home was a blur of silent tears and simmering rage. I felt hollowed out, gutted. My apartment, usually a refuge, felt cold and empty. I sat on my couch, staring at nothing, the events of the last hour replaying in my mind like a horrible, endless loop. Marcus's smug face, Brenda's cruel smirk, Aunt Carol's cold detachment, and David, my brother, his pale face, his averted gaze that was the deepest cut. How could he? How could they all? For 10 years I'd eaten, slept, and breathed Sterling Solutions. Weekends, holidays, late nights. I'd miss birthdays, family dinners, vacations. I'd sacrifice personal relationships, pushing everything aside for the business. I'd believed in it, in us. I'd seen it as my duty, my legacy, to grow what my grandfather and father had built. And this was my reward. Kicked out, publicly humiliated, my life's work stolen by the very people I trusted. The heartbreak was immense. It wasn't just about the job or the money or the power. It was about the betrayal. It was about losing my identity, my purpose. It was about the crushing realization that my own family saw me as expendable, as an obstacle to their own greed. The house felt too quiet. I kept expecting to hear the hum of a server, the distant ring of a phone, the chatter of colleagues. But there was nothing, just the ringing silence of my new, empty life. Hours passed. I don't know how many. The sunset plunging my apartment into twilight. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just sat there, a statue of despair. Then slowly through the fog of my misery, a small, insistent thought began to surface. It was faint at first, like a whisper in a hurricane. But it grew, gathering strength. The thought about the shares. My father. Grandpa Joe. Dad had always been incredibly meticulous about the business. He never left anything to chance. He talked about building a fortress, ensuring the company's future was secure. And Grandpa Joe, he was even more traditional, fiercely protective of his legacy. He'd established Sterling Solutions from nothing, with sheer grit and a handshake. He was paranoid about outside influences, about anyone trying to seize control. He often said, "Always keep your aces up your sleeve, son, especially when it comes to family business." I remembered a specific conversation with my dad, years ago, shortly after I took over as CEO. He was frail then, but his mind was still sharp. We were going over the company's foundational documents. He pointed to a specific clause, something about Class A shares versus Class B shares. I'd glossed over it at the time. It seemed like legal jargon, a formality. He had smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "Remember this, son, some shares are more equal than others. It's a safeguard, a last resort, for when things get tough, for when you need to make sure the right person is truly in charge." At the time, I'd nodded, probably preoccupied with some urgent client issue. I'd thought he meant it was a protection against hostile takeovers from outside the family. It never occurred to me he might have meant protection from the family, but now the memory came back with surprising clarity. Class A shares. They weren't common shares. They carried disproportionate voting power. Grandpa Joe had set it up that way. Dad had reiterated it. My heart gave a faint flutter. Could it be? Could Marcus and Brenda have overlooked something so fundamental? They were so focused on the percentage numbers, 65% versus 30%. But if my 30% was made up of Class A shares, and their 65% was made up of Class B, the arithmetic would be entirely different. I remember Dad saying, "Your Class A shares, they're the keys to the castle. Don't ever forget that. They can't be diluted. Not easily. It's a protection for the vision." He'd even hinted that not everyone in the family knew the full implications of the different share classes. It was a secret, a quiet understanding between him and me, and before that, between him and Grandpa Joe, a quiet understanding about the true power structure. A tiny spark of defiance ignited in my chest. It wasn't a triumphant roar yet, not even a hopeful glow. It was just a faint whisper, a desperate prayer in the darkness. But it was enough. Enough to pull myself up from the couch. Enough to make me stumble towards my old filing cabinet in the corner of the room. My dad's will, the company's original incorporation documents, the shareholder agreements, they were all in there, stashed away, forgotten for years. I had always assumed everything was straightforward, that the existing records at the company reflected the true ownership. But what if they didn't? What if there was a hidden layer, a failsafe, designed precisely for a moment like this? My hands trembled as I fumbled with the cabinet lock. This wasn't just about getting my job back. This was about justice. This was about fighting back against a betrayal so deep it had shattered my world. They thought they had won. They thought they had won. They thought they had won. They thought they had everything. But they might have just forgotten the most important detail of all. They forgot about Grandpa Joe's aces. My hands were shaking as I rummaged through the dusty files in the old metal cabinet. This wasn't some fancy high-tech filing system. This was the kind of cabinet my dad used for his personal papers, things he wanted to keep close. It smelled of old paper and dust. I pulled out document after document, my eyes scanning for anything related to Sterling Solutions' share structure. There was Dad's will, a thick sheaf of papers. There were old tax returns, faded invoices, even a few of my childhood drawings. My heart ached as I looked at a drawing of a lopsided house with a stick-figure family smiling outside. Happy memories. Now so much pain. I kept digging. Shareholder agreements, articles of incorporation, board meeting minutes from decades ago. I pulled out a heavy-bound book, its cover faded brown. Sterling Solutions Share Ledger, original. This was it. This was the Holy Grail. I carefully opened the ledger. Pages were yellowed, thin, but the ink was still legible. It was a handwritten record of every share issued since the company's inception. I flipped through the first few pages, seeing Grandpa Joe's meticulous handwriting. Then Dad's, and finally, mine, after I'd inherited my portion. What I saw made my breath hitch. The vast majority of shares listed were indeed Class B. These were the standard common shares, 1 share, 1 vote. Marcus had his portion, Brenda inherited hers, Aunt Carol had a small parcel, and David, through a separate trust set up by Dad, had his. All Class B. This accounted for the 65% they claimed. But then further down, beneath a thick ruled line, there was a separate section. It was titled in Grandpa Joe's elegant script, Class A Founders Shares, and listed directly underneath, unmistakably, was my name. Not just my name, but a specific number of shares. A smaller number than the total common shares, yes. But next to it, in parentheses, were the words, 10 votes per share, Epsom votes per share. My heart hammered against my ribs. It wasn't a dream, it wasn't a faded memory, it was real. Grandpa Joe had done it. Dad had maintained it. This was the failsafe. I quickly did the math, my 30% of total shares. But within that 30%, a significant portion of it was comprised of these Class A shares. If each of those shares carried 10 votes, then my actual voting power wasn't 30%. It was exponentially higher. Let's say, hypothetically, the company had 1,000 shares total. If I had 300 shares, and 200 of those were Class A shares with 10 votes each, that would be 2,000 votes from just those, plus the remaining 100 Class B shares, giving me 100 votes, totaling 2,100 votes. And if their 650 shares were all Class B, they'd only have 650 votes. The numbers were rough, of course. I didn't know the exact split between my Class A and Class B shares, or the total number of shares issued, but the principle was undeniable. My voting power was far, far more than 30%. It was the actual majority. A surge of adrenaline, cold and exhilarating, coursed through me. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was furious. They had gambled on my ignorance, on their own greed. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought I wouldn't remember, wouldn't find this. But they were wrong, so incredibly wrong. I meticulously checked other documents in the ledger. There were entries confirming the transfer of these Class A shares from Grandpa Joe to my dad, and then from my dad to me. Each transfer was signed and dated, witnessed and notarized. It was all legal, all ironclad. I pulled out the Articles of Incorporation. On a faded addendum, there it was. A detailed explanation of Class A and Class B shares, the voting rights and the condition. It clearly stated that Class A shares held 10 votes per share and could not be diluted without unanimous consent of all Class A shareholders. And I was the only Class A shareholder. My dad had consolidated all of Grandpa Joe's Class A shares and passed them directly to me. He had been so careful, so protective. The implications were staggering. They hadn't just made a mistake, they had committed a monumental blunder. They had voted me out, effectively claiming control of the company based on a fundamental miscalculation of the true voting power. They thought they were majority shareholders, but they weren't. I was. The despair that had consumed me began to recede, replaced by a cold, burning determination. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. This was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. It was about justice for my father, for my grandfather, and for every ounce of my life I'd poured into Sterling Solutions. But I couldn't just march back in there. Not yet. I needed to be smart. I needed to be strategic. They had blindsided me once. I wouldn't let it happen again. I spent the rest of the night poring over the documents, cross-referencing, double-checking. My mind, previously clouded by grief, was now sharp and focused. I thought about Marcus, his slick confidence. Brenda, her sneering triumph. They had been so sure, so arrogant. It was almost laughable if it wasn't so devastating. I needed professional counsel, a lawyer who specialized in corporate law, preferably someone with experience in family business disputes, someone who could handle this delicate but explosive situation. I had a few names in mind, top-tier firms I'd used for Sterling Solutions' bigger contracts. This wasn't just a contract dispute, though. This was a war, a family war. And I was going to fight it with everything I had. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold by the time I finished. I hadn't slept a wink, but I felt a strange sense of calm. The heartbreak was still there, a dull ache in my chest, a reminder of the betrayal. But now, it was tempered by a powerful sense of purpose. They had voted me out. They had forgotten I held the majority of the share. And soon, they were going to find out just how big a mistake that was. The next morning, I made calls. My first call was to my best friend, Alex. He's a lawyer, though not corporate law, but he knows people. I briefly explained the situation. enough to convey the gravity and the surprising twist. He listened, his silence a testament to his shock, then promised to connect me with the best corporate litigator he knew, a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was sharp, no nonsense, and she got it instantly. I brought the ledger and the other documents to her office. She meticulously went through every page, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up, a faint smile playing on her lips. Your grandfather was a genius. Your father was very wise to follow his lead. And your family, well, let's just say they made a significant oversight. So I really do have the controlling interest. I asked a mix of hope and disbelief. Absolutely, she confirmed. Based on these documents, your Class A shares give you an overwhelming majority of the voting power. Their 65% of Class B shares doesn't come close. You not only control the company, you dictate every decision effectively. The words were like cool water on a parched throat. A wave of relief, quickly followed by a resurgence of anger, washed over me. So, what now? Now, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming, we send them a letter. A very official, very clear letter, informing them of their error. We demand your immediate reinstatement as CEO and a full accounting of all decisions made since your unlawful removal. Unlawful removal. I like the sound of that. It is, she stated. They acted beyond their authority. Any decisions they made, any contracts they signed, any funds they moved, all potentially null and void. And they are personally liable. That was a bombshell. Personal liability. The thought of Marcus and Brenda facing financial ruin, losing everything, should have been satisfying. And it was a little. But it was also sobering. This was my family. The very idea of it twisted my gut. But then I remembered David's averted eyes, Marcus's cruel smirk, Brenda's sneer. They didn't think about my family when they kicked me out. Sarah drafted the letter. It was formal, legally precise, and utterly devastating. She advised me to have it delivered by a legal courier, not email or regular mail. The shock had to be immediate and undeniable. The waiting was excruciating. Every minute felt like an hour. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept replaying the coming confrontation. How would they react? Would they deny it? Would they beg? Then the call came. Not from Marcus, not from Brenda. From David. His voice was hoarse, panicked. Are you out of your mind? What is this letter? What are you trying to do? He stammered. What am I trying to do, David? I said, my voice carefully neutral, though my heart was pounding. I am trying to set things right. You voted me out of my own company, my life's work. You remember that, don't you? The shares, Marcus said. He said it was fine. He said we had the majority. We checked the records at the office. We saw the percentages. You saw some of the records, David. You didn't see all of them. Or you didn't understand what you were looking at. Did you forget about Grandpa Joe's Class A shares? Dad talked about them, remember? The special voting rights. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a choked sound. No, that can't be. Marcus said those were just for historical purposes. He said they didn't count for active voting. Marcus was wrong. Or he lied. And now you are all facing the consequences. I have the original ledger, the articles of incorporation, notarized documents. My lawyer has confirmed everything. I hold the majority of the votes, David. Not you, not Marcus, not Brenda, me. Another silence, this one longer, filled with David's ragged breathing. What do you want? He finally managed. His voice was broken. I want what's mine, I said, my voice hardening. I want my company back, and I want to know why you did this. We were just trying to improve things, Marcus said. You were holding us back. He had big plans. He said we could make so much more money if we just streamlined things, cut out the dead weight. And Brenda, she was so convincing. She said you wouldn't listen to new ideas. Dead weight? Is that what I am to you, David? After everything? The heartbreak flared again, sharp and fresh. And what about loyalty? What about family? I am sorry. I really am. I should have talked to you. I just got swept up in it. They were so sure. Sure enough to betray me, sure enough to kick me out. Now, here is what's going to happen. You have two choices. You can cooperate and make this as painless as possible, or we can go to court. And if we go to court, David, I'm coming for everything. Every penny, every asset they've touched, every decision they've made. And you'll be dragged into it too. Choose wisely. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly. It felt good to take control, to speak with that kind of power. But it also felt awful. This was my little brother. This was my family. And I was effectively threatening to ruin them. Within an hour, Marcus called. No more smooth talk. His voice was high-pitched, filled with incredulity and anger. The hell is this, a joke? You think you can just waltz back in here? We have proof, percentages, legal documents. So do I, Marcus, I said calmly. And mine go back further, and they're legally more binding. You overlooked the Class A shares. You fundamentally misunderstood the corporate structure. And now, you are in serious trouble. Because everything you've done since you voted me out is invalid. Every contract, every strategic decision. And I am prepared to take legal action to reclaim my position and hold you accountable for every single one of those actions. He sputtered. You wouldn't dare, we're family. You forgot that when you voted me out, Marcus. You forgot that when you had security escort me out like a criminal. You forgot that when you thought you could just take everything I built. Now it's my turn to remind you. You have 24 hours to reinstate me as CEO, restore my board position, and hand over control. If not, my lawyer will file a preliminary injunction. First thing tomorrow morning, and we will begin discovery. And trust me, Marcus, discovery will be very, very ugly for you. I hung up before he could respond. My heart was still pounding, but the knot of despair had loosened considerably. It was replaced by a grim satisfaction. They thought they had won. They thought they had crushed me. But they had forgotten the most important thing. And now, they were going to pay for that oversight. The 24 hours passed in a blur of calls and quiet tension. Marcus, Brenda, and David didn't call back with an immediate surrender. Instead, their own lawyer called Sarah, my lawyer. Conversation, as Sarah later recounted it, was a mixture of bluster, denial, and thinly veiled threats. They claimed the documents were outdated, that my interpretation was flawed, and that they would fight any attempt to disrupt the new management. They're digging in, Sarah told me, her voice calm. It means they're either truly oblivious, or they're gambling that you won't go through with it. Or perhaps they have something else up their sleeve. They're underestimating me, I said, a cold certainty in my voice. They always have. Let's file, and so we did. The legal firestorm began. Sarah filed for an emergency injunction to halt all company operations under the current management and demand my immediate reinstatement based on the undisputed evidence of my voting majority. Paperwork was dense, but the message was clear. I was coming for them. The first response from their side was predictable. A motion to dismiss, claiming harassment and a spurious lawsuit. But Sarah was prepared. She had compiled a mountain of evidence. The original articles of incorporation, the share ledger, multiple notarized transfers, and expert opinions on corporate law interpretation. Their arguments crumbled under the weight of it. The initial hearing was a tense affair. I sat beside Sarah, facing Marcus, Brenda, and David, across the courtroom. Marcus looked pale and strained, no longer the slick businessman. Brenda's usual confident smirk was replaced by a tight, angry line. David wouldn't meet my eyes again. Aunt Carol wasn't there. She had apparently distanced herself after the initial letter, realizing the depth of the trouble they were in. Their lawyer, a loud, aggressive man named Mr. Thompson, tried to argue that the Class A shares were an archaic structure, effectively nullified by subsequent shareholder agreements or unwritten understandings. He tried to claim I was manipulating old documents. Sarah, in contrast, was precise and surgical. She laid out the timeline, the clear legal language in the original documents, and the consistent record-keeping in the ledger. She pointed out that no subsequent agreement had ever legally nullified the Class A voting rights. Your Honor, she concluded, my client possesses the unequivocal legal majority of voting shares in Sterling Solutions. Their actions to remove him were without legal basis, and their continued control of the company is an ongoing fraud against my client and the company itself. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a keen eye, listened intently. She clearly wasn't impressed by Mr. Thompson's bluster. After an hour of arguments, she leaned forward. Based on the preliminary evidence presented, the plaintiff has demonstrated a strong likelihood of success on the merits. The Class A shares appear to convey superior voting rights, as per the original articles. I am inclined to grant the preliminary injunction. All current operations of Sterling Solutions are to be halted, pending further review, and Mr. My Last Name is provisionally reinstated as CEO while we sort out the full facts. The defendants are to provide full access to all company records within 48 hours. A gasp went through their side of the courtroom. Marcus's face turned ashen. Brenda looked like she wanted to explode. David buried his face in his hands. I felt a surge of triumph, cold and hard. This was just the first battle, but it was a crucial victory. It proved that I wasn't bluffing. It proved that their claims were baseless. But the emotional toll was immense. Every legal document, every court appearance ripped open old wounds. Flashbacks flooded my mind. Marcus, when I was a kid, always trying to one-up my dad, always making subtle digs about Dad's old-fashioned ways. Brenda, growing up, always jealous of any attention I got from Grandpa Joe or Dad, constantly whispering how I was the golden child, and she was overlooked. David, always so easily swayed, so eager to please, especially those who promised him an easier path or more money. I'd always try to protect him, but maybe I'd protected him too much. Was this always lurking beneath the surface? Was it always about envy, about power, about their own perceived slights? I had seen our family as a unit bound by love and a shared legacy. They saw it as a ladder, and I was in their way. Over the next few weeks, the legal process ground on. Discovery began, a painful process of unearthing every company document, every email, every internal memo. It was during this phase that the true depth of their deceit started to unravel. They had not only planned my removal, but they had been actively trying to push through a massive deal to sell off a significant part of Sterling Solutions' intellectual property to a shell company they secretly controlled. A shell company that Marcus and Brenda had set up months ago. Profits from this sale, a multi-million-dollar sum, would have gone directly into their pockets, essentially gutting the company's future value. And they would have done it just days after my removal, before I had a chance to react. David, it turned out, wasn't privy to this particular scheme. He was just part of the initial coup. When he found out about Marcus and Brenda's deeper plot during the discovery process, he seemed genuinely horrified. His already fragile demeanor shattered. The betrayal now had a new layer. It wasn't just about being kicked out. It was about them actively trying to loot the company, the very legacy we were supposedly all building together. The heartbreak turned to a colder, harder fury. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was a criminal enterprise. And I was going to make sure they paid for every single part of it. The discovery process was like peeling back layers of an onion. Each new revelation stinging my eyes with a fresh wave of betrayal and disgust. With the judge's order, Sarah and her team gained full access to Sterling Solutions' internal servers, emails, financial records, and private communications. What they found was far worse than I had imagined. The first shock was the sheer scale of the planning. Marcus and Brenda hadn't just decided on a whim to vote me out. They had been meticulously plotting this for over a year. There were email chains, discreet meetings logged in calendars, and even coded messages discussing Project Phoenix, their cynical name for my ousting and the subsequent restructuring. They had compiled dossiers on my perceived weaknesses, my old-fashioned business practices, my supposed unwillingness to adapt. It was all a fabricated narrative, designed to justify their takeover. Then came the financial malfeasance. The shell company, Horizon Ventures, was revealed to be a direct conduit for Marcus and Brenda's personal enrichment. They had drawn up contracts to sell off Sterling Solutions' most valuable patents and future projects for pennies on the dollar to Horizon Ventures. Plan was to then flip those assets for massive profits to a legitimate third party, leaving Sterling Solutions a hollowed-out shell while they walked away with a fortune. This was corporate piracy, plain and simple. And it was all happening behind my back, while I was pouring every ounce of my energy into growing the company. My personal assistant, Clara, who had worked for Sterling for 20 years, called me in tears. She had been forced to give them access to my office files, my calendar, even my personal contacts. She was distraught, feeling like she had betrayed me. I assured her it wasn't her fault. She was just doing her job. But the thought of them rummaging through my private life, looking for dirt, made my skin crawl. The most painful discovery, however, involved David. While he wasn't directly involved in the Horizon Ventures scheme, he had been manipulated into believing I was. Marcus and Brenda had fed him a constant stream of lies, that I was stifling his career, that I was ignoring his ideas, that I was actively trying to keep him down. They preyed on his insecurities, promising him a bigger role, more influence, and a share of the new profits once I was gone. One email from Brenda to Marcus, found deep in the archives, chilled me to the bone. Read, "David is weak, easy to sway. Just keep telling him he's smarter than my name and deserves more. He'll sign anything." Reading that, I felt a fresh wave of anguish. My own brother, reduced to a pawn in their greedy game. He wasn't just an accomplice. He was a victim of their manipulation too. Not that it excused his actions, but it explained them. The evidence mounted, undeniable and damning. Sarah built an airtight case for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate malfeasance. She moved to have Marcus and Brenda removed from all current and future involvement with Sterling Solutions, and to block any further attempts to divest assets. She also started the process of reclaiming any funds they had already siphoned off and freezing their personal assets. The legal pressure on their side became immense. Mr. Thompson, their lawyer, tried to negotiate a settlement, but his proposals were laughable. He offered to let me return as CEO, but with Marcus and Brenda still on the board, retaining their shares and an agreement to drop all legal actions against them. I laughed him out of the virtual meeting. They tried to gut the company, Mr. Thompson. They tried to steal from me and from the legacy my family built. There will be no settlement that allows them to walk away unscathed. They will face the full force of the law. Their family turned on each other. David, once he fully understood the extent of Marcus and Brenda's plan for Horizon Ventures, turned on them. He provided testimony, confirming that he had been misled and that he had no knowledge of their asset-stripping scheme. It was a painful moment, seeing my brother in a legal setting, testifying against his own father and cousin. But it was also a sign of hope, a small step towards redemption for him. Aunt Carol, terrified of losing her own modest fortune, also distanced herself, claiming ignorance and offering to cooperate, if it meant avoiding legal repercussions. The family dinner table, once a symbol of unity, was now a battlefield of accusations and blame. The family name Sterling, once a source of pride, now carried a bitter taste. The heartbreak wasn't just mine anymore. It was ripping through the very fabric of our family. But they had started it. They had lit the match. Despite the mounting evidence and the crumbling of their defense, Marcus and Brenda remained defiant, albeit increasingly desperate. They tried to spread rumors about me, claiming I was unstable, that I was embezzling funds myself, anything to discredit me. They even leaked false stories to some local business news outlets, trying to sway public opinion. But their lies were easily debunked by Sarah's team, who immediately issued counterstatements backed by irrefutable evidence. Every day was a grind. Long hours with Sarah, reviewing documents, planning strategy, preparing for depositions. The stress was immense. I barely slept. My appetite was gone, but beneath the exhaustion, a steel resolve had formed. This wasn't just about getting my job back. It was about truth, justice, and defending the legacy of my grandfather and father. It was about making sure that no one, especially not those who claimed to be family, could ever do something like this again. The emotional scars were deep, raw, and still bleeding. But my resolve was now unbreakable. The legal battle stretched on, a slow, grinding war of attrition. But as the family fractured, and Marcus and Brenda's lies became more exposed, unexpected allies began to emerge from the wreckage of Sterling Solutions. The first was Clara, my former assistant, after seeing the full extent of the Horizon Ventures scheme. During the legal discovery process, she was utterly disgusted. She had worked for Sterling Solutions for over 2 decades, starting with my grandfather. The company was her second family. She saw Marcus and Brenda's actions as a personal affront, a desecration of everything she had helped build. Clara came to me, not through Sarah's official channels, but quietly, discreetly. She offered me something invaluable. Intentole memos, personal notes from Marcus and Brenda, and even recordings of conversations she had made years ago. Simply for her own record-keeping, that clearly showed their long-standing resentment towards me and their desire to take over. She had a strong sense of loyalty to the company and to me, given our long working relationship. She said, "They tried to destroy everything, my name. Grandpa Joe would roll over in his grave. I couldn't stand by and watch." Her testimony, unbiased and detailed, became a powerful tool in our case. Then there was Mr. Henderson, a senior engineer who had been with Sterling for almost as long as Clara. He was a quiet man, highly respected for his technical expertise. He reached out to me through a mutual contact. He revealed that Marcus and Brenda had pressured him and his team to falsify technical reports, to make the intellectual property they wanted to sell to Horizon Ventures seem less valuable, thereby justifying the ridiculously low sale price. He had refused, but others had been intimidated. He showed me internal memos from his team pushing back against Marcus's demands, warnings about the technical and legal risks. His evidence was crucial in proving their intent to defraud the company. These acts of quiet defiance from people who had nothing to gain and potentially a lot to lose fortified my resolve. It wasn't just my fight. It was a fight for the integrity of Sterling Solutions, for the values my grandfather had instilled in it. It wasn't just about my personal betrayal. It was about protecting the hundreds of employees who relied on the company for their livelihoods. There were setbacks too, of course. Marcus and Brenda, in their desperation, resorted to ever more vicious tactics. They leaked fabricated stories to smaller, less reputable news outlets, painting me as an incompetent, vindictive CEO. They even tried to involve some of Sterling's long-standing clients, feeding them misinformation about the company's instability and my supposed mismanagement. A few clients wavered, temporarily pausing contracts, causing financial strain on the company's operations. It was a deliberate attempt to cripple Sterling Solutions, hoping I would be forced to settle. But Sarah was proactive. We quickly released carefully worded statements, backed by court documents, clarifying the truth. We engaged a PR firm to counter their smear campaign, and I personally reached out to our most important clients, reassuring them, sharing the truth about the legal battle and my commitment to the company. The trust I had built over years of hard work helped stem the tide. Most of our clients, knowing my reputation, stuck with us. One afternoon, during a particularly grueling deposition, I found myself facing Brenda. She was defiant, her eyes blazing with hatred. She accused me of being a bully, of ruining the family. "You don't care about anyone but yourself," she spat, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury. "You always thought you were better than everyone. You think you are so smart with your shares, but you are destroying everything." I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just anger, but a profound fear. Fear of losing, fear of exposure, fear of the consequences of her own actions. "I didn't destroy anything, Brenda," I said, my voice dead. "You did. You and Marcus. You tried to take what wasn't yours. You tried to sell off the future of this company for your own selfish gain, and you betrayed your own family to do it. You created this mess." She broke eye contact, her jaw working. The realization was dawning on them. The game was up. Their elaborate scheme was unraveling, piece by agonizing piece. The weight of the evidence, the crumbling of their alliances, the turning of David against them, the unexpected support from longtime employees. It was all tightening the net around them. The tide was undeniably turning. The judge, having seen the detailed evidence presented by Sarah, became increasingly impatient with Mr. Thompson's tactics. The initial injunction was made permanent, effectively stripping Marcus and Brenda of any power within the company. All company bank accounts and assets were frozen, preventing them from siphoning off any more funds. The biggest turning point came during a pre-trial mediation session. Sarah laid out our full case, detailing the fraud, the breach of fiduciary duty, the intent to loot the company. She presented the evidence from Clara, Mr. Henderson, the damning emails, the financial records of Horizon Ventures. She explained the criminal implications of their actions. Marcus, for the first time, looked truly broken. The arrogant posture, the slick smile, all gone. He looked like an old, defeated man. Brenda was still defiant, but her voice cracked when she spoke. They were cornered. They had no more cards to play, and they knew it. The long, agonizing battle was finally nearing its end. And I, against all odds, was going to win. But the cost was still immeasurable. The mediation session was excruciating. Sarah had laid out our case with devastating clarity. She presented evidence not just of their attempt to illegally seize control, but of their elaborate scheme to defraud Sterling Solutions through Horizon Ventures. She spoke about Marcus and Brenda's breach of fiduciary duty, the falsified documents, the attempts to manipulate employee testimony. She even brought up the recent smear campaign, presenting evidence of their direct involvement. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, had very little left to argue with. Their grand plan had been exposed. The Class A shares were undeniable. The paper trail for Horizon Ventures was solid. David's testimony, albeit reluctant, had cemented their manipulation. Clara's and Mr. Henderson's bravery in coming forward had provided irrefutable internal evidence. Marcus sat across from me, his shoulders slumped. Brenda for once was silent, her face pale. The smugness was completely gone, replaced by fear and a simmering, desperate rage. Aunt Carol was a non-factor by now. She'd already quietly signed away her shares back to the company, hoping to avoid any further legal entanglement. The mediator, a retired judge, spoke plainly. Mr. Thompson, your clients are facing severe charges, not just civil penalties but potentially criminal ones. The evidence of corporate fraud, asset stripping and market manipulation is substantial. My recommendation is that you advise them to settle, and to do so quickly, before this moves to a full trial. Mr. Thompson looked at his clients. He whispered something to Marcus. Marcus shook his head slightly, then slowly nodded. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. "You win," he rasped. His voice was barely a whisper. "You win everything." Brenda slammed her fist on the table, making everyone jump. "No, I am not giving up. He can't do this to us." "Brenda," Marcus said, his voice weary, "it's over. We're going to lose everything anyway. We might as well try to salvage something." Sarah presented our terms. They were simple, direct, and non-negotiable. Marcus and Brenda were to immediately and permanently relinquish all their shares in Sterling Solutions for a symbolic sum of $1. This was to remove them from any future ownership or claim to the company. They were to resign from any and all board positions, past, present, or future, and agree never to seek employment or involvement with Sterling Solutions again. They were to formally admit to their unlawful actions and publicly apologize to me and to the employees of Sterling Solutions. This was important to me, to clear my name and restore faith. They were to pay restitution for any funds siphoned off through Horizon Ventures, as well as covering all my legal fees. All claims against David and Aunt Carol would be dropped, given their cooperation and lesser involvement. Marcus looked like he was going to vomit. Brenda was shaking with silent fury. "These terms are punitive," Mr. Thompson argued weakly. "They're just," Sarah countered, her voice firm. "Your clients attempted to destroy a company and ruin my client's life. They faced potential prison time. This is a lenient outcome considering the circumstances." The mediator leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, I agree with Miss Jenkins. Given the evidence, this is a fair settlement. Your clients should consider themselves fortunate." After more heated whispers between Marcus, Brenda, and their lawyer, Marcus finally nodded again. Brenda sat, rigid and silent, her eyes still blazing but defeated. The documents were drawn up quickly. The signing was a solemn, silent affair. Each signature felt like a hammer falling, sealing their fate. My hand was steady as I signed my name, reclaiming my company, my legacy. When it was all done, Marcus stood up. He walked over to me. For a moment, I thought he might say something, offer a genuine apology, or perhaps even a threat. Instead, he just looked at me, a strange mix of regret and hatred in his eyes. "I never thought you had it in you," he said, his voice flat. "I underestimated you." "You did," I replied, my voice calm, "and you paid the price." He turned and walked out, Brenda following silently behind him. David was already gone. He'd left the room before the final signing, unable to watch. The victory felt hollow in some ways. I had won the battle, reclaimed my company, but I had lost my family. The very idea of family now felt tainted, bruised beyond repair. The heartbreaking part of the story wasn't just about my initial betrayal. It was about the shattering of a family bond that I had always held sacred. But it wasn't just about loss. It was also about strength. I had faced down my betrayers. I had fought for what was right. I had honored my grandfather and father's legacy. And I had emerged, broken perhaps, but undeniably stronger. Returning to Sterling Solutions the next day was surreal. The judge's order and the settlement agreement were swiftly executed. Marcus and Brenda's access was permanently revoked. Brenda's brief stint as interim CEO was officially nullified. I walked through the familiar halls, now back in my rightful place. Clara met me at my office door, her eyes shining with relief. Mr. Henderson nodded approvingly. Employees I passed in the hallways looked at me with respect, some with sympathy, but all with recognition that I was back where I belonged. My office, stripped bare just weeks ago, was now exactly as I had left. My photos, my awards, my personal effects, everything was back in its place. It was like no time had passed. But everything had changed. I was changed. I sat in my chair looking out at the city skyline. The company was mine again, truly mine. But the path to rebuild not just the business, but my own shattered trust, stretched long and hard before me. The hammer had fallen, and while it had brought justice, it had also splintered my world. The days following the settlement were a whirlwind of activity. My first priority was to stabilize Sterling Solutions. The brief period of Marcus and Brenda's control had caused significant disruption. To her, as if Tremtra 15 employee morale was low, and some projects had stalled. I held an all-hands meeting, addressing the entire company. I spoke honestly, but without dwelling on the personal pain. It has been a difficult few weeks for all of us, I began, my voice steady. There have been significant challenges, and I know many of you have been concerned. I want to assure you that the situation has been resolved. I am back as CEO, and the company is fully under my leadership. We will rebuild, we will innovate, and we will emerge stronger than ever. I then addressed the issue of Marcus and Brenda. Their involvement with Sterling Solutions has been terminated. Their actions were contrary to the values of this company and its founders. We have taken legal action to protect Sterling Solutions, and that action has concluded successfully. I didn't go into the gritty details of fraud and personal betrayal. The employees didn't need that. They needed stability and confidence. I focused on the future. I announced immediate steps to reassure clients, reactivate stalled projects, and restore a sense of purpose. I thanked Clara and Mr. Henderson publicly, acknowledging their loyalty and integrity, which sent a powerful message to everyone else. Rebuilding wasn't easy. The financial damage from the attempted asset stripping, though largely mitigated by freezing their assets, still meant a period of tight cash flow. We had to recover from the bad press and reassure the market. It was a painstaking process requiring long hours, difficult decisions, and a lot of emotional resilience. The hardest part, perhaps, was dealing with the lingering human fallout. David, my brother, he reached out to me a few days after the settlement. He didn't ask for money or a job or anything. He just wanted to talk. We met at a quiet coffee shop far from Sterling Solutions. He looked exhausted, haunted. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I was so stupid. They made it sound so logical, so easy, like you were holding us back, and I wanted to believe it because it meant a bigger slice for me, an easier path. He teared up. I never knew about the Horizon Ventures thing. When I found out, I wanted to tell you, but I was so scared. I looked at my brother, the boy I'd grown up with, and felt a complex mix of anger, sadness, and something akin to pity. He wasn't evil, just weak, easily manipulated and greedy. You made your choices, David, I said, and those choices had consequences. For you and for me. Can we ever fix this? He asked, his voice full of hope. I took a deep breath. The betrayal was too deep, the wound too fresh. I don't know, David, I said honestly. What you did, it broke something in me. Something fundamental. I don't know if it can ever be put back together. He nodded slowly, tears running down his face. He knew. I hadn't condemned him entirely, but I hadn't forgiven him either. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He got up and left, and I didn't stop him. That relationship for now was severed. Marcus and Brenda's lives, I heard, were in shambles. Court-ordered restitution, combined with their legal fees and frozen assets, had left them effectively bankrupt. Marcus had lost his luxurious home and his expensive car. Brenda, unable to find another high-level position in the industry, after the public exposure of their fraud, had retreated from the business world entirely. They were pariahs. I felt no joy in their downfall, only a grim sense of justice. They had made their bed. Aunt Carol, having wisely distanced herself early, managed to escape relatively unscathed, though she, too, had lost her shares in the company. She occasionally sent me polite, awkward emails, trying to maintain some semblance of family connection. I responded minimally. The trust was gone. The most difficult challenge was healing myself. The betrayal had left a deep, searing scar. I found it hard to trust people, especially those closest to me. I second-guessed every decision, worried about hidden motives. The joy I once felt in leading Sterling Solutions was tempered by a constant awareness of how easily everything could be taken away. I started seeing a therapist, something I never would have considered before. It helped to talk through the anger, the pain, the profound sense of loss. They helped me understand that while the family as I knew it was gone, I could build a new kind of family within Sterling Solutions, with the loyal employees who had stood by me. I also began to reevaluate the company's governance. The Class A shares protected me. Yes, but the fact that a large portion of the family could conspire against me showed a deeper flaw in the culture. I initiated new transparency measures, regular open forums for employees, and stronger ethical guidelines. I wanted to build a company where loyalty and integrity were truly valued, where no one felt excluded or unheard. The company slowly, steadily began to recover. New contracts came in. Employee morale rose. The market regained confidence. Sterling Solutions was not just surviving, it was beginning to thrive again. But it was a different company now, and I was a different leader. The old naive, trusting me was gone. In his place was someone tougher, more cautious, but also more committed to leading with integrity and protecting those who truly believed in the company's mission. The heart had been broken, but it was slowly, painfully starting to mend. It's been 2 years since that Tuesday, the day my world shattered, and then slowly began to rebuild. Sterling Solutions is thriving. We've not only recovered from the attempted sabotage, but we've grown, expanded into new markets, and launched several innovative products. And revenue is higher than ever, and our employee satisfaction scores are through the roof. I am still the CEO, and I still hold the majority of the shares. Class A shares are a constant, quiet reminder of the power I hold and the responsibility that comes with it. I never forget the lessons learned. The company culture is different now. I've implemented a new leadership model, one focused on transparency, open communication, and shared success. I've promoted people like Clara and Mr. Henderson to key leadership roles, recognizing their loyalty and talent. We have regular town halls where employees can ask anything. And I share financial results and strategic decisions openly. I've learned that true power isn't about wielding a hammer, but about building trust. My relationships with the rest of my family are complicated. David still reaches out from time to time. He's working a modest job, far from the corporate world. He's trying to build a new life and he seems genuinely remorseful. I respond to his messages sometimes. We don't talk about the business or the past much. The wound is still there, a phantom ache. I don't feel anger anymore, just a deep sadness for what was lost. Forgiveness is a long road, and I am still on it. Some bonds, once broken, can never be fully repaired. Marcus and Brenda are gone from my life. I hear rumors sometimes, financial struggles, legal troubles stemming from other dubious ventures they attempted. Their names are effectively poison in the industry. I don't follow their lives closely. They made their choices, and they are living with the consequences. Aunt Carol occasionally sends holiday cards. I send one back. It's polite, distant. The family as I once knew it, the one that gathered for holidays and shared dreams, doesn't exist anymore. The betrayal cut too deep. That hearth, once warm and comforting, is cold and empty now. And that's the hearth-breaking part that still resonates. Winning back the company, proving them wrong, achieving justice, all of that was necessary and right. But it came at a profound cost. I lost the illusion of a loving, supportive family. I lost a part of my own innocence, my trust in people. The world feels a little colder, a little more calculating now. But I also gained something. I gained a deep understanding of resilience. I discovered an inner strength I didn't know I had. I learned the true meaning of leadership and the importance of integrity, especially when everyone around you is failing the test. I've redefined what family means to me. It's not just blood. People who stand by you, who support you, who believe in your vision and values. The team at Sterling Solutions who rallied around me, who helped me rebuild. That's my new family. And this new hearth built on trust and respect is slowly, steadily warming up. I often think about Grandpa Joe and my dad. They saw this coming, didn't they? They built in that failsafe, knowing that ambition and greed could corrupt even the closest bonds. They prepared me, without me even realizing it, for a fight I never wanted to have. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Their legacy wasn't just the company, it was the wisdom and the tools to protect it. Life isn't a fairy tale. Not every ending is happy and clean. My story isn't about complete forgiveness or a miraculous reunion. It's about survival, about fighting for what's right, and about finding strength in the aftermath of profound betrayal. It's about accepting that some things are broken forever, but that new, stronger things can be built in their place. I look out my office window at the city stretching before me. Sterling Solutions is no longer just a family business in the traditional sense. It's my business, and I am protecting it fiercely. The scars remain, but they are a testament to what I've overcome, and they remind me to never ever forget. The ace is up my sleeve.